North American Soccer League. Live from Lockhart Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the Tampa Bay Rowdies versus the Fort Lauderdale Strikers.
Okay, Tim. So first question is, what does the rivalry between the Fort Lauderdale Strikers and the Tampa Bay Rowdies mean to you?
Well, when the Strikers started playing in Fort Lauderdale in 1977, the first big rival they had was the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and I think there are a number of reasons for it. There were certainly some colorful characters on both the Strikers and the Rowdies that fed into the rivalry. Robbie Marsh, who was the primary goal scorer for the Rowdies at that time, was a loudmouth Brit who loved to talk trash. He was loved by the Tampa fans and hated everywhere else he went because of his colorful demeanor and his swagger. And he certainly fueled the rivalry by comments that he would make every time that the Rowdies and Strikers were to play each other. Ron Newman, who coached the Strikers in 77, 78, and 79, was another colorful Brit who liked to feed off of the Marsh trash talking and throw in some of his own. And I think the rivalry became really big when the Strikers played the Rowdies in the playoffs in 78 or 79 and lost in a shootout in a downpour where it was hard to dribble the ball toward the goal during the shootout. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think one shootout goal was made in 5 attempts by both teams combined. And of course it was Marsh who made it. So we always had a capacity or near capacity crowd here at Lockhart Stadium when we played the Rowdies, and they always drew one of their biggest, if not their biggest crowd of the year when the Strikers would go up there to play at Tampa Stadium. I remember in 79 or 80 we played up there in front of over 40,000 people. That's the biggest crowd I remember. And the game went to overtime. Gerd Mueller scored off a corner kick at overtime to win that game, so that was certainly one of the highlights of the rivalry. But the Strikers-Rowdies rivalry was certainly one of the biggest in the entire NASL during the heyday of the league in the 70s and 80s.
This week, the beach has been all but forgotten in Fort Lauderdale as the city built up to today's soccer game. There have been cookouts and rallies, and this morning a parade to the stadium. Now the tailgate parties are wrapping up as a crowd thought to be the largest ever to see a game here gathers in Lockhart Stadium. For the first time, they tell us it may be more than 20,000.
Here comes Cubillas. He's still by himself. There's the shot, and it's a goal for Fort Lauderdale. Nene Cubillas on a solo run.
Was there something special about Fort Lauderdale, about the Fort Lauderdale Tampa professionally throughout the years that soccer has been in South Florida?
Yeah, I think soccer fans are accustomed to taking road trips. I know when we had games in Tampa back in those days, we had a lot of fans that would travel up to Tampa to see the Strikers and Rowdies clash, and the same was true when the game was held here at Lockhart. A lot of Tampa people would come down for the games, and of course when you have that kind of atmosphere, that always helps a rivalry. When there's fans in your stadium rooting for the other team, wearing the other team's colors, I think that as a fan, you always want to really see your team win to send those people home disappointed. I think that adds to the rivalry, and again, because of the colorful characters that were involved, I think players that came in, after the Strikers and Rowdies had been playing for a few years, right away knew about the rivalry because of the players that had been there and had been through it, talking about how big the games were and how much the games meant to the fans and to the players and to the organizations. So, and you're right, I don't think there are a lot of natural rivalries in other professional sports among the teams that reside in Florida. So the Strikers-Rowdies rivalry was always, among the biggest, if not the biggest.
Yeah, talk about sort of standing the test of time, that regardless of throughout, the original NASL obviously folded in 1984, but then new teams popping up. Whenever pro soccer teams popped up in Tampa and Fort Lauderdale, the rivalry was instantly back. And going into now talking about the present, the rivalry is just as strong, leading into any game between the Rowdies and Strikers.
Yeah, and again, I think it's because of the history of it. The original Strikers and original Rowdies got the ball rolling with the rivalry, and it's carried over, as you mentioned, with the other soccer teams that have played over the years in the two areas, and now with the sort of the rebirth of the North American Soccer League, the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, the Tampa Bay Rowdies. It's just natural, and the fans, I think, understand it. And again, you've got the travel back and forth with the fans that adds to it, and I think it's going to grow tremendously over the upcoming years.
Was there a strong supporters group sort of culture? Obviously, now you have Flight 19, the Ultras on the Strikers side, and Ralph's Mob on the Rowdy side. Was the mob were they in existence back in
back then they were more commonly called booster clubs, not just in soccer but in pro sports in general in this country. We had a very large Strikers booster club, which is the equivalent of these, as you call them, supporters groups. Literally hundreds and hundreds of people were signed up to the Strikers Booster Club. The Rowdies had a similar organization, and obviously those are the types of people that are your biggest fans and go to road games. And I think during our peak, we would have several buses of fans and a caravan of cars with the buses going up to Tampa, and likewise when the Rowdies came down here. It wasn't just 25 or 50 fans. It was hundreds, literally hundreds of fans traveling back and forth to see these games.
Rob goes around Ridley. Rob has some room now. Back to Marsh. Now Patton is open. He's got Marsh and Rob coming down the middle. Shot, loose ball, goal! Dave Robb, I believe, and Marsh made sure.
You mentioned the playoff game and the characters. Was there a particular something that Marsh said that sticks in your memory?
Well, he used to. For a while, they sort of had the Strikers number, and he loved to talk about that and how the Rowdies. It's not a rivalry because the Rowdies always win. He would inflaming comments, and Marsh was not a dumb guy. He knew that by fanning the flames like that, he was creating interest in the game. So, you had to take it sort of with a grain of salt. But, there was a little bit of WWF in Rodney Marsh. He was a great promoter of the game, and those are the kind of characters that helped really make the NASL relevant back in those days. It was great to have that kind of trash talk going on to help stoke the flames.
Well, the Strikers had their own Brit known for his colorful language in Ray Hudson.
Yes. And I remember George Best got into it as well. Those guys really took the rivalry seriously. So whenever we were able to win games against the Rowdies, there was a lot of chirping going on after the games, and it was intensely played on the field. The games were always intense, not necessarily rough, but there were a couple that were. And there were some players back in those days that played on both the Rowdies and then the Strikers. In fact, two that I can think of that played for the Rowdies first and then the Strikers, and they really wanted to win the games, probably worse than our guys who hadn't played over there. Steve Wegerle and Arsena Gust. Arsena Gust was a very intimidating left back of Haitian descent, and I remember he took out somebody in front of the Rowdies bench in a game here at Lockhart. I thought he would get a red card. He got a yellow, but he probably deserved a red. I mean, and it was just minutes into the game. He just came in and whacked one of their guys right in front of their bench. He was sending a message that he is wearing the other colors now, and he wants to win this. So it was always interesting. There was always a lot going on.
They've got a good chance once again over on the left side to Badonzi. Badonzi trying to find somebody to center it to. And he does to Hudson. The header by Hudson, beautifully saved by Dubose.
What? Again, you have to think that was destined to be a goal. It took everything, I think, that Dubose could put into that to save that.
This is
Badonzi with the cross. Hudson running in at full speed, throws himself at the ball. Here he comes from the right, throws himself at the ball, and that ball is headed for the goal.
Oh, boy.
And now the current strikers and Rowdies, just the third year into the NASL, into the rebirth of the NASL, and you have already the seeds you can see of a strong rivalry between the two clubs. On April 27th, the rivalry renews here at Lockhart between the two clubs. What does a win mean to you?
Obviously, it's a very big game for both clubs. I think it's an even bigger game for the Strikers. It's our second home game of the season, and we managed to draw with Edmonton the first home game, so we need to establish our dominance at home. We had a very good home record last year. Tampa's coming in as the defending North American Soccer League champs. That just gives us more incentive to knock them off and give our team some confidence heading in to the remainder of the season. So it's a big game, regardless of who we're playing. It's a big game to play the NASL champs, your second home game after drawing your first home game, and then add to that it's the Rowdies. It's a huge game.
And Fort Lauderdale scored 3 goals in the second half. Jones, he's got an opening. Here's the cross. Here's Nanchoff. Knocked down. Loose ball. Nanchoff. Save on the line. Rebound. Goal! Oh! Unbelievable! David Irving, I believe it was.
Do you remember the rivalries? How did it spill over? When talking about pro rivalries at the time, did it when people would talk about sports, in South Florida, at the time in the early '80s, in the late '70s, early '80s, how would they talk about the rivalry?
I will say this. I think I get the sense that the rivalry between the Strikers and the Rowdies back in the day was more important to the Tampa fans than it was to us. And I say that because I think Tampa has always felt kind of an inferiority complex to Miami, Fort Lauderdale. The Dolphins were well established and had won a couple of Super Bowls before the Bucks were born, and there were a lot of Dolphin fans in the Tampa Bay area before the Bucks were even born. And I know from talking to people from that area, when the Bucks were born, a lot of people, especially initially, hung on to their Dolphin roots, so to speak, and would watch the Dolphins on Sundays rather than the Bucks. And the people who immediately converted to being Bucks fans were, offended by that. So I think there's sort of always been a kind of an inferiority complex in Tampa about what South Florida has and what pro teams South Florida has. And I think that is the kind of thing that spills over from Strikers, Rowdies, Bucks, Dolphins, and other Lightning, Panthers, perhaps. I think it's more important to the people over there because they feel like, we have it better, or it's perceived that our end of the state is the better part of the state than theirs.
And starting 0-26 couldn't have helped.
Exactly.
The Buccaneers very much.
They're probably fortunate that they didn't get into the AFC East with the Dolphins right away, because the Dolphins probably would have drummed them year after year after year, and then there would be a real rivalry. If they had been in the same division with the Dolphins, I think there'd be a much bigger rivalry between the Dolphins and the Bucks now.